poetry, it means to determine its rhyme and rhythm. So to be able to say what is, where does this poem have certain stressed syllables or unstressed syllables, and where does it rhyme? Now, you're not going to be tested on these words as far as I know, and I'm not going to test you on them. So I have given you what I think are just the important terms that you need to know. Again, if it sounds intimidating, it is not meant to be such. These are simply the words that we use to describe these elements of poetry. And again, it's all stuff that makes sense according to common sense. Just like anything else, there are specific words that we use to describe it that if you've never heard them before are unfamiliar. But just complain if I'm going too fast or ask me a question or whatever. And then we'll dig into some actual, poetry here in a minute and see what this sounds like in examples. But I'll give you a few selected words that we need to know before we jump into that. Like I said, when we say scanning a poem, it just means figuring this stuff out in the poem, or practicing scan-shin is just looking at a poem and figuring out its rhyme and its meter. So the word meter, I'm on 2A here. A meter is just a specific pattern of rhythm in a poem. So when you're finding the meter, you find where the stressed syllables are and where the unstressed syllables are. Now, we all know what stressed and unstressed syllables are, even if we've never tried to find them in writing before. We speak this way. Number one, under there are some things that every word has a stress, and in certain places on it, you'll find it in the dictionary. You don't go into Daylight Donuts and say, "I'll have a donut, please," right? That's not how you say the word. It's just not. Again, this is something when you learn a foreign language, you have to learn because we don't know. There's also, a rhetorical stress, or a stress that you place on a word because of what you're trying to get across. Oh, you brought those brownies? That's wonderful. Oh, I didn't think you brought the brownies. You did? So you place emphasis on a certain word depending on your meaning also. So that's what we mean by stressed and unstressed syllables. And we all know what syllables are, right? Okay. Words made up of syllables. Yeah, you guys are smart, right? We're clear on that. So in poetry, yes, we do look at every single syllable of the words when we're scanning them. Probably not something you want to do for a Charles Dickens novel, but you probably could. We just don't do it because they're too darn long. Okay, when we talk about metrical feet, we're talking about each unit of syllables that go together. And this will make more sense when we look at it in an actual poem, but there are some sorts of rhythms that recur in poetry that we needed names for. So somebody came up with names for them, and they're always either 2 or 3 syllables. And so when we're scanning a poem, we try to figure out where the stresses are, and then we can see these metrical feet. And we'll look at some examples of these. The I am means unstressed, stressed.
That's number one here, the I am.
B1.
Yeah. The I am is going to come back and be your friend.
Yes. The I am, we'll say this later, but you'll see this in Shakespeare and Chaucer and other places. Some people think that iambic patterning is something that actually happens in our normal speech, like that in English, we tend to speak iambically, and we'll look at that and see whether you think that's true or not. A trochee is stressed, unstressed. A dactyl is stressed, unstressed, stressed. We're on number 3 now. Anapest is unstressed, stressed, stressed, and a spondee is stressed, stressed. Now, there are certainly other combinations that we could have, but these are the 5 that we have names for, and that we need to know if we're going to be talking about poetry. Again, we don't have to remember these names. We have the handout. We'll look at some specific examples here in a minute. A couple more terms before we jump into the examples in section 3 I have here in your handout. We also have names for the numbers of feet, remember, so each of those units, like if you have an IM or a trochee or a spondy, one of those things, one of those counts as 1 metrical foot. And then we also, in scansion, count how many metrical feet are in each line of a poem. And they have names for each of those that sound a lot like the numbers, right? So manometer, dimeter, trimeter, tetrameter, etc. Some of these are more or less common. Only after 1950 can I think of anything with manometer in it, and even then it's pretty rare. But some of these are much more common, and you'll see them more. So those are all the names. We have those. I think rhyming is a little more obvious than these different elements of meter or rhythm, but there are different kinds of rhyme. When we think of rhyme, we think about what in literature we call true rhyme or perfect rhyme, which is a correspondence of sounds in the accented syllable, and it's a correspondence of both the vowel sound and the consonant sound at the end of a word. And then there's a different sound in front of that. So I have some examples there. Again, we don't need to remember too much about this, but a masculine rhyme is when the rhyme is on the accented syllable only, so like long or song. Like those two words sort of obviously rhyme, right? And then again, a triple rhyme, glorious and victorious. Like we know those words rhyme. There are other kind of trickier rhymes. I know when you guys read some of the medieval stuff in both the Song of Roland and in Dream of the Rood, you'll also have internal rhyme, which is also called assonance, which means you have just a similarity of the vowel sound in the middle of a word, but it doesn't actually rhyme. So we wouldn't even think that it rhymed, but you know, love and move have like kind of almost sounds like a rhyme, but not quite. Yeah, we'll look at some more specific examples. When you're scanning a poem and you get asked to identify the rhyme scheme, I have this in letter E. What that means is that we assign the same letter of the alphabet to each similar sound in a stanza of poetry. A stanza means a group of lines that are together, so we've all seen those in poetry, right? Like when you're reading the Divine Comedy, there are little sections of 3, right? Each one of those is a stanza. And so we would identify the first word, like in the example I have here, it is an ancient mariner. Okay, that's A because we just started. The last word of the next line is 3. Does that rhyme with mariner? No. That in no way rhymes with mariner, right?
So it gets a different letter.
So we give it a different letter. Right. We give it B. I, does that rhyme with mariner? No. Does it rhyme with 3? No, it doesn't. So we give it a new letter. We give it C. But me, what does that rhyme with that we already had? Hey, me, that rhymes with something. That rhymes with 3, right? So we give that a B. So we would say that the rhyme scheme of that stanza from the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner is A, B, C, B. Because line 2 and line 4 both have the same ending sound. So, am I explaining? Does that make sense?
So we're talking about the rhyme at the end.
Just at the end.
Right.
We don't, thank you. Even if there is rhyme in the middle of a line, we don't include that in the rhyme scheme. We talk about that differently. Right. We might find it interesting to talk about internal rhyme, but it's only end rhyme that we include in the rhyme scheme. So that makes it simpler, really. I mean, if you're trying to find the rhyme scheme of a poem, you just look at the end and try to keep track of, how many sounds are similar. Now, obviously, in a lengthy work like Dante, when we identify the rhyme scheme, we would need, there's only 26 letters in the alphabet, so we usually take breaks in sections of the poems, either whether they're in the different cantos or in some poems even just thematic groupings, or sometimes in longer poems. I'll show you this in a Tennyson poem that I included in here. Just every stanza you start over. And it might be interesting to look and see if there are
comparisons there between the
two,
stanzas,
but
yeah.
when you're actually finding the rhyme scheme, you just look at the one group that you have right there.
So when people talk about like the rhyme, this is the way people talk about rhyme scheme. Like when you're reading an introduction to a longer poem or something like that, they'll say this has like an A B B C or an A B A or like something like that rhyme scheme. This is what they're referring to. When you take that end rhyme of the line, that last like sound, and you see how if it rhymes or does not rhyme with the sounds of the next lines. So there's a sort of limited kind of way in which that goes. But I just want you guys to be familiar when someone says this is like, this is an A, B, C, B rhyme scheme of a poem. Then you know, right, okay, at the end of the line, I have an A and then a B and then a C and then a B. So my repeating B is my rhyme.
Yeah.
And that's this will really help you to be familiar, to sort of understand the slightly more technical language that people use when they're talking about literature.
And this might be a time, if you flip to the end of the handout that I gave you, section 5, I included a few important rhyme schemes, metrical patterns, and forms.
Awesome.
There are many, many, many more than this, but these were just some of the ones that you have in this class. So, like for instance, terza rima, which is Dante, we have ABA, BCB, DED, etc. So when somebody says terza rima, you're supposed to know, okay, those are 3-line stanzas rhyming ABA, CDE. So, or if somebody just says 3-line stanzas rhyming ABA, BCB, you're supposed to think, oh, Dante. And then this form actually became popular, particularly later in the 19th century, 18th and 19th century and beyond. But that's something that when somebody says that, you know what the rhyme scheme is. I don't know if you're reading any Shakespeare sonnets or if you're just.
We're going to read quite a lot of the plays.
A few of the plays.
Yeah.
So you'll see the plays will have their own rhyme scheme, and I've got a couple of Shakespeare passages here we can look at. Shakespeare also wrote a lot of sonnets. Sonnets are always easy to identify. They have a nice rhyme scheme. Sonnets are always 14 lines, and depending on what kind of sonnet it is, it has, you can see F and G there at the end, a certain, it's kind of nice to just have such a short poem. It's usually pretty easy to figure out what the rhymes are. So when
very
people
complete
talk about,
and like almost kind of perfect in how it deals with rhyme.
Yes. That's why a lot of, if you take a class post Shakespeare, every great poet wrote sonnets. They sometimes messed with them and did various different things with the rhythm and rhyme, but they all wanted to write sonnets because that was just, wow, it's kind of neat, like a little package. Okay, so there are tons of different ways that poems have been put together. Chaucer uses a ton of different rhyme schemes. So, and again, you may or may not get into that with what Mrs. Gervasi is going to talk about, but I don't know what you're reading exactly, but Chaucer uses a lot of different rhyme schemes and a lot of different meters. So you can check that out. Okay. Questions, guys? Am I making sense? Rhyming, rhyme schemes. I am Turkey Dactyl Anapest. Anyone want to tell me? No, I'm just kidding. Quiz. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I have to admit, I had to look up. I was like, okay, is the trochee the one with stressed, unstressed? I was like, okay, I remember. Okay. I think what we should do is look at a couple of simple examples. In section 3, I just have some short examples of these named sets of stressed and unstressed syllables, and I think it'll make a little more sense. We got the rhyming under control. Like we can do the rhyming, right? Like we're agreed on that. Okay, so Maria, can you just say to be or not to be, please?
To be or not to be?
You guys just came from theater practice too, right? I mean, you should be able to say that with
That's right, with emphasis. Put the emphasis on the right syllable.
Exactly. Thank you, Mrs. Gervasi. There's a nice example. So maybe because of your theater background, you didn't say to be or not to be or some other strange combination of that, right? But we don't speak that way, right? Like, we know where the syllables are supposed to be stressed and where they're not. It's kind of, it just doesn't sound right. And we almost can't say, like, well, in some cases it gets more complicated than this. But with that line, it's like to be or not to be, right? Like, it's just a sort of natural rhythm of language. Right? Am I making this up? That's a natural rhythm of language, right? Now, again, some people think that English is naturally iambic, that we have this kind of stressed, unstressed, so maybe that means that's easier for us. But let's see. Elizabeth, would you read the line underneath B? I won't say it first, just so we can see. I don't want to prejudice you. It's just that short line from William Blake there.
Tiger, tiger, burning bright.
All right, so did Elizabeth put the stresses in the right place? Like I have on there?
Kind of fell off in the bright there at the end.
The bright,
Right
question
right
mark.
didn't, there was a sort of question mark at the end that went up.
burning bright.
Burning bright? Like, really? That bright? Is this brightness? Yeah.
There's at the end of the line, there's always a little bit of ambiguity, so we didn't include the next section. But yeah, I mean, nobody says tiger, right? Tiger, like, it's just not how we speak. It doesn't work that way. And the next one, the anapestic, this seems even less natural. Really, like, unstressed, stressed, that's the anapest. That seems really complicated. But when you read 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, which is always the classic example of this, like, nobody has trouble reading that, right? Again, we don't say 'twas the night before Christmas when all through, like, and I'm reading it overly dramatically, but we don't say it like that. There might be some, in the next example we see there might be some ambiguity, but as we continue reading, especially, it's sort of like you get into it, you realize where you're supposed to put the emphasis, right? It's not that.
And that's a
hard
really
when you're
useful line
reading it
to
out
remember, because
loud.
we almost all know that. So when you say, "'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house," there's that ending line, or that ending sound, night, Christ, all house, and then you can sort of imagine your next line, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse.
See, it works with
Like,
memory too.
it- I mean, it helps,
jogs your
right?
mind,
It
yeah.
helps you to sort of to remember, but also that's like there's a natural rhythm there. Whereas the Forest Primeval is a little bit harder.
This is a little bit harder, yes. And I think it was nice that Mrs. Gervasi started tapping her hand at the right moments. It's actually a lot easier to do the stressed syllables first. So if, I don't know, for some reason anybody randomly asks you to scan a poem, or if you are asked to scan a poem for whatever reason, and you're like, oh no, I don't know what to do, find the stressed syllables first. That's always the easiest way to do it. And from there, you can either just assume all the rest of them are unstressed, or you can dig into it more deeply. But if you just read it out loud and start tapping your hands, it'll help you.
You're gonna find the stress. Yeah.
You'll find the stress syllables.
What's the line after "This is a Forest Primeval"? I don't remember.
Oh my gosh, I don't know either. Yeah.
You don't have all of your Longfellow memorized. This is very shocking.
No, you have you've revealed the difficulty I had with even coming up with this. I can't give away why it was difficult for me to come up with an example of a dactyl, but I'll tell you after we read the first example under number 4A. But this is a Forest Primeval is an example of a dactyl. So that one is the stressed, unstressed, those 3 syllables. But this is a little bit difficult, partly because
What did you do?
It's just wet on the bottom again.
Sorry, John Paul's burning a house down.
Again.
Partly because most of us have not read Evangeline by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Clearly, I haven't either because I can't even remember the next line. But also because we can say it, this is the forest primeval. That sounds nice, but when you read the first line, you could also say, this is the forest primeval, right? You could say that if you were trying to emphasize the fact that it was in fact the forest primeval, and not another forest or the non-forest primeval or something else. But I think as you read on, you see that the next part of the line fit with the dactylic meter, right? You don't say the forest. If that's just not, we don't say that. That's not how you say the word forest. You could say this is instead of this is the, but you could not say forest primeval. Like that's not the English language. So again, one thing I should say too, before we dig into a couple of poems here, I don't ever want to say that there isn't a right or wrong answer. But in some cases, especially when you're reading great literature, it's actually extremely rare to find a poem, a great poem in the history of literature that is completely all one rhyme scheme, or one metrical pattern that's always the same. You know, always an iamb with 10 syllables. Yeah, but there's going to be some variation, because when there's variation, it's going to affect the meaning, and something interesting is going to be happening. And I hope we'll be able to look at that in a couple of examples. But when you're talking about, especially, rhyme is a little more straightforward, right? When we're talking about metrical patterns, you're always going to have a possibility for discussion. Again, not so much with forest, right? We just don't speak that way. But even there are some examples, you guys probably all know the tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. At the end, you're supposed to rhyme symmetry, right? Like, you're supposed to say, William Blake loves to rhyme things that mean that you speak something differently. That's not how we say symmetry, right? That doesn't actually.
Do you guys
rhyme.
remember this? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye can frame thy fearful symmetry?
Right. Like that doesn't actually.
It needs
rhyme.
to be symmetry, and that's what he wants you to say. But almost in saying it, it's an emphasis on the word symmetry, because what immortal hand or eye can frame thy fearful symmetry is not what we say, right? But if you think of it. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, bright night, there we go. What immortal hand or eye, so then we have eye is obviously going to be the next, that's our rhyme, can frame thy fearful symmetry. Well, that's weird, right? But even in saying that, some people say it's symmetry, which is what Blake wanted us to do. Some people say it's symmetry, which is how I generally say it. But just when you have that twist, and even when you break the rhyme scheme, you're noticing something, right? There's an emphasis on the word symmetry because of the fact that it's being pronounced differently. So that's just a famous line that people use from Blake. Tiger, Tiger is a very famous poem for this purpose, to show like rhyme scheme.
Yeah, and it's not because William Blake didn't know that was how you said the word symmetry, right? Like, it was because he wanted you to pay attention to it right there. I just realized I didn't give you an example of a spondee, which is the stressed. We'll see an example of it in what we read, but actually also, let's see, didn't I give you part of, flip back to section 2 under where I had the rhyme scheme. Glory be to God for dappled things.
Oh yeah,
that's a good Beauty by Gerard Manley Hopkins. I didn't have the whole poem on here, but glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of couple color as a brinded cow, right? This is a poem, this was under
H2.
So it's right there on the top of page 2. So right under the Ancient Mariner. This is Gerard Manley Hopkins, and it's a really famous, beautiful, lovely poem.
It's a beautiful poem.
Just read along, and you can sort of hear how it is.
I'll just read it out loud, and I'll try to remember the end of it. Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of couple color as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire coal chestnut falls, finches' wings, landscape plotted in peace, fold, fallow, and plow. So that was, you see the rhyme scheme there? Like, that was pretty easy. Like, that was a pretty straight up ABC, ABC, right? And all trades, their gear and tackle and trim. So that's, at the end there, we have some nice, simple rhymes. But so the poem continues. We can see, anyone know what brinded means? Couple color as a brinded cow.
Just
You take a guess at it. You don't have to raise your hand. You're good.
Isn't it like a spotted cow?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, something brinded means particularly like dark versus light speckles, like a cow or a paint horse, a pinto, something like that. So this is a poem about things that have the beauty of God's creation in those things that are diverse, different, right? All the things where opposites come together. And then the poem continues actually after, and all trades, their gear and tackle and trim. He says, all things counter, original, spare, strange, whatever is fickle, freckled, who knows how. And then here's why this has to do with the spondy. Then he gives a series of opposites that he contrasts, but he loves them because he's talking about dappled things, right? Whatever is, counter, original, spare, strange, sweet, sour, swift, slow, a dazzle, dim. Those are spondies. Those are 2-syllable opposites that are both stressed because he loves both of them.
Stress.
Because they're
So
dappled,
the
right?
spondaic foot,
Spondy
the
is
stress.
stress.
Can you say those again?
Yeah, so it was when he says, let's see, where did I go back to the poem there? Yeah, so he says sweet, sour, what was the next one? No, it's gone out of my head.
Swift,
Sweet,
slow.
sour, thank you. Swift, slow, a dazzle, dim. A dazzle is more than one syllable, so sweet, sour.
You cheated a little bit.
Those are, but that's a spondy because we want, and it has to do with the meaning, right? Sweet and sour, he's saying, are equally beautiful because God created things dappled. And then there's a lovely spondy at the end of the poem too. After that he says, a dazzle, dim. He fathers forth whose beauty is past change, who's God, right? And then he ends with the phrase, praise him. That's another spondy. When we say praise him, we use emphasis on both of those. Spondy, 2 stressed syllables. We don't say praise him and then go down. Like
I was trying to make that
like,
sound. Like, how would you say praise him if you
like,
had an unstressed syllable in there?
Yeah, we don't say
like,
praise him even.
Him or something.
Praise him,
yeah,
right?
like it would be weird. So when you say praise him, just think of it versus unstressed. Like pa or a's, him or so. If you were breaking it up,
Yeah.
so if you're gonna emphasize both, praise him, like you're hitting both hard.
And that's in that poem it's beautiful. Because we're praising God at the end and we're emphasizing praise him, right? So we have two stressed syllables there because he wants to praise God and it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys gave me a memory test there. Okay. All right.
This is such a great poem. I've forgotten how
beautiful
good
poem.
this is. It's just so. There's so many, like the way. I guess this is one thing I would say. The way that he look at the way the meaning and the words are going together. So glory be to God for dappled things. All right. So then we're interested in things. We're gonna get A B C. So we're gonna things cow swim, wings plow trim. So that's gonna met things cow swim, wings plow trim. But before you even get to that, glory be to God for dappled things, and then he's gonna dapple everything. There's little bits and bobs and spots and sparks all over the poem. All right, rose moles stipple upon trout that swim. So stipple, the little dots that are on the fish, fresh fire coal, chestnut falls, finch's wings. Like the way that he is speaking about the dappled things, the words that he's using, which themselves like give us images of dappling, of spots and things, and almost the kind of dappley way that he's using the words, little bits here, right? Like the spondy, right? Hit, emphasis. So the meaning and the word choice and the rhythm, like the metrical foot, the rhythm and the rhyme are all working together to emphasize this dappled nature of creation. That is a great poem. That's when you find a person who can pull all those things together. That's what we meant earlier about that it's not just the story being pulled by the form, right? It's not just like the story of the knights and the castles and the chivalric love being pulled by this sort of like archaic wagon of poetry. You have the meaning present throughout the structure and the word choice and the rhyme and the rhythm and the meter of the poem. Does that make sense a little bit? I think Hopkins really brings that out in this little line.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're not at all. That was helpful. And yeah, we won't scan dappled things just because it's very irregular, and it's actually a sort of a sonnet, believe it or not. It's not 14 lines, and it's not a traditional sonnet, but I think it's a sort of a sonnet. You use it before, because many things are sort of a sonnet. Are you good there? Yeah. Okay. So, why are we talking about that?
Practice
the
scanning
spondee,
poems.
right?
Right.
Yeah, forgot the spondee. Fortunately,
Ooh,
Hopkins
Charge
gave
of
us
the
a
Light
nice
Brigade.
example there.
Look at you.
Okay, the Charge of the Light Brigade is
Turn
the
the
first
page,
example I
guys.
have on here.
So
And
much
actually,
fun.
I'm going to use the whiteboard here for a
Go
second.
for it.
We had to memorize the whole thing. in
Good.
first
I'm
grade.
so
Good
glad.
for you. Well, then
Yes.
you can recite it for us.
Exactly. Very nice.
There were bits and
If you
pieces
guys
of
want
it.
highlighters to play with your poem, that's fine.
And I was
Sometimes
gonna
it's good
show
to put
you
notes
guys-
on your sheet, John Paul. If I'm forcing you to use a highlighter, John Paul. There
We
you go.
can mark these up. I want you to try to find the stressed and unstressed syllables. I want you to try to find the feet. Again, I'm not going to quiz you, but at the same time, give it a try. You got to try it. Otherwise, you're not
So remember
going to know
feet.
whether you can do it.
There's the 1 through 5 feet options in the
So,
front.
I was going to say, when we do this in class or whatever, and you want to indicate which syllables are stressed or unstressed. For stressed, we use this sign on top of the word, and for unstressed, we use that little sign. So you don't have to do it that way. I couldn't figure out how to do that on my computer. I used to know how to do it, but I couldn't figure it out. So that's why I just did, the bold. But if you want to do it properly, you can put the little slash,
Right.
what do you call the thing? A slash or a slanted line.
It's been so long.
Versus the
Right. So that's the traditional way of showing stressed and unstressed. Over the top of a word. Stressed and then a little U for un. Just think of it as a U for
in a
unstressed.
textbook or something.
Yeah, that's what they mean.
That's what they mean. And then typically I did this in the examples that we just looked at for the different feet. In between feet, like between if half was the end, you would just draw a line. Well, not that long of a line. Just a line that goes there, and then so just draw a vertical line in between each of the feet. If you see that marking up, that's how we typically do it for marking meter. And then you can try to figure out the rhyme at the end there. Mrs. Krasasi, I forgot my pen. May I please borrow one?
Absolutely.
Thank
There
you. Thank you.
Can you pass this, please, honey?
Thank you. Paul. I appreciate it.
Now I'm wondering if I'm right, and I'm doing this, and I'm like, oh man, I'm taking my first test in quite a few years.
No,
Okay, guys, put some stressed, unstressed lines
try
on
to
this
do
first
it.
section.
I'm gonna do it right along with you. Actually, I did tennyson already, so I'm gonna skip to the next one. But yeah, this is review for me too. I haven't scanned a poem in probably a couple of years, so we'll test it out here. If you want to tap your hand on the table while you're
I
doing
know,
it,
I was like, I need to make noise.
Maybe I'll make some noise. It's like nice quiet neighborhood here. We need some children playing outside or something. Oh wait, it's 10 degrees.
Exactly. Because normally there would be like a hoops free for all
Yeah,
happening
exactly.
right here, but
Okay.
it's a little cold.
Charlie driving dramatically right outside the window.
Okay, I think I've created a rhyme scheme that doesn't exist.
Well,
I'm a little concerned about this here.
I did say there was some possible variation.
Not like a perpetual variation, yes. Okay, does everybody
Get
have
through the
at
first
least
get through the first stanza, and then
stanza.
we'll just
And
look
then
at
we'll-
it together.
yeah, that's good.
Just get through. Did you at least make some guesses on the first stanza
I
there?
just did the same thing throughout.
Yeah, kind of.
Well, no, remember, just follow the sense. All right, if you were reading the poem, where would your voice like emphasize? So go for the stressed syllables first.
Yeah.
Then worry out what's unstressed.
I think what we'll do. I made these girls read something out loud. So John Paul, I'm going to make you just read that first section out loud for us. Don't worry about the stressing. Just read it.
Okay.
There's the one that's labeled. Just read those
One.
few lines. Yep, just one.
So half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death, rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Anyone want to take a guess at that first line? Half a league, where we place the stresses? John Paul, you placed the stresses on league. Right? I mean, didn't he place the stresses on league? Did you hear that? He sort of said half a league.
Right. Right.
Is it
You're
supposed to be half a league?
You're tossing me for a loop here.
Right.
It seems to me that it would be more natural to say
Half a league,
I mean,
onward. Yeah, I was like, he was like half a league, and I was like, John Paul, what's happening right now? Apparently, natural stress, and John Paul did not totally agree.
He had his own interpretation. It was a league, not a mile.
Right.
Not 10 feet. It
Right.
was
A league. The league was we were hitting the
That's,
league. That's really true.
League is
So
not
if you were
the
doing
word
it that
we
way,
use.
like if you have the stress, so then he would have an unstressed stressed
Yeah.
syllable. That is of course not the answer, John Paul. Thank you very much. But
when I
Well, I
said
did
there's
the
no
opposite
right
of
answer,
right.
when I said there's no right answer, I meant sometimes there's a right answer.
Okay, yeah, Marisa, why don't you?
So I
take it away there.
Yeah, no. So if you said half a league, right? That would be unstressed, stressed. But I think actually, especially you see the repetition of the word half there, and followed by the word league. Like we have this kind of, I think, stressed first syllable. Half a league, onward. Like all in the valley of death rode the 600. I think
messed
that
up
would
that
be.
part. Whoops. I messed up my death a little bit. I just like to say it that way.
And I will say, John Paul, you got this part nice, especially when you said charge for the guns. He said, like
Right.
your voice actually got a little bit louder when you said the words charge and guns, and that was right on. Charge for the guns. He said, like, and it makes sense. Those are the most important words in that line, right? Again, here we see that meaning. Charge and guns are the only words that really have a whole lot of content in that line, right? The other ones are just because we need to say charge and guns, right?
Right.
So yeah, charge for the guns, he said, into the valley of death road. And you said road the 600 nicely too, those two times that you repeated it. So, anyone remember off the top of your head what stressed, unstressed was? Yes, you're right. It was a dactyl. Not a pterodactyl. A dactyl. So when I was joking before about finding another example of the dactyl, dactyls are actually not very common. The only example of a dactyl that I could come up with without lots of thinking was this poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, because it's a very clear dactylic meter. Now, so how many feet do we have here? Let's take that first line, half a league, where's 1 foot? Where would we draw the vertical line there? If a dactyl is the 3 syllables, half a league, we draw the vertical
So dactyl,
line.
stress, unstressed, stress. So half a league. Half a league.
Each
We're
one
hitting
of
the
those.
half, and then a league is unstressed.
Mhm.
So stressed, unstressed, unstressed.
Mhm.
So then that's the foot, and at the end of the foot you stop. So if we say half a league, then where would you draw the line for stopping? Maria, what you got, baby? If we say half a league, where would you draw the line in that for stopping?
After the leagues.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
So that's
exactly
what you're doing.
So we would have how many feet in that first line? Yeah, 2, exactly. Very good.
Precisely.
If we flip back in our minds or on our handouts to where I had the named names for the number of metrical feet in one line, we would know that 2 feet in one line is called diameter or diameter. I think it's diameter. I could be wrong there, but again,
She sounds like a goddess, Demeter, but then
Yeah, I know, right?
we'll roll with it. Okay.
So this is, we would call it dactylic diameter. If we looked more specifically at this, we would find that there are some variations, like for instance, all in the valley of death actually adds a stressed syllable on the end of that line.
Right.
But then road the 600 is lacking in it only has 5 syllables. So we have a kind of enjambment that means lines that follow one onto the other there.
When you have, like, sometimes they call it enjambment, like, if you at the end of your line, you're not really done, or you're a little overdone.
Yeah.
And that syllable kind of moves down to the beginning of the second line. They call that enjambment, which I always loved as an issue. It's like the one thing I could always remember. If you jam up the last
easy
line.
word to remember. That's
Right, it's like a traffic jam in the last line of the poem, you know.
But so there is some variation here, but generally the charge of the Light Brigade is dactylic diameter.
So you see, like when we talked about Homer, we talked about dactylic hexameter. So now you get the dactylic part, all right? So we have our dactylic foot, and you have the diameter or Demeter or goddesses or diameter or whatever we're gonna say, 2 meters. In other words, 2 feet for the meter. So then you can see, like, that's where the meaning in that word is when they say dactylic hexameter. We talked about this at the time. I did this terrible job of like explaining. And I think you have something. Don't you have something down here that's dactylic?
That's dactylic.
Is it Lake of Innisfree? Isn't that?
Lake Isle of Innisfree is largely iambic.
Largely
the
iambic.
rest
Okay,
of
never
what I
mind.
have is iambic.
No, don't worry, it's good. I just wanted you to know when we have identified a dactylic diameter like poem. So now you know, okay, dactylic, it has this specific meaning. Diameter has a specific meaning. So you can see they're not just, this isn't kind of coming out of nowhere. That you're breaking the lines up into stressed and unstressed syllables, and then you're breaking those groups of stressed and unstressed syllables up into feet, and then you're seeing how many feet that each sort of line has. So anyway, okay.
Yeah, no, and we are technically at the end of your class time.
Are we? Don't we have another 10 minutes?
Because
We
we pushed it back 10 minutes.
We pushed it back 10 minutes
Okay.
because of a whole tribe.
Well,
thing.
let's, as much as I love Yeats, let's skip over the Lake Isle of Innisfree for now and just move on to Shakespeare.
Awesome.
Because I know that you guys are going to be reading some Shakespeare here. The Lake Isle of Innisfree is a poem everyone should read and
Memorize.
You should read it. And it has a beautiful spondee at the end, the deep heart's core. It's beautiful. I wish somebody would illustrate a beautiful children's book of it because I love to read it out loud, but you know, I can't just stand in the middle of my house and I could, I guess, just say it, but it'd be better if I could read it out of a book that I could ostensibly at least be reading it to my children. But anyway, you should all read that poem and memorize it. But for the sake of time, we'll skip ahead. This section from the beginning of Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet, I must say, is not my favorite Shakespeare,
but when it comes to
there
there's
is
so many
some
good
iambic
lines.
pentameter
Yeah.
in there that's quite
And this
lovely
is a
and
great.
neat.
This is it's the very beginning of the poem.
Yes.
Or the play, and it's just a wonderful concatenation of circumstances here.
So again, why don't you guys just give it a go in just 30 seconds here, and with the first couple of lines, see if you can do the scanning, and see how it comes to you.
I might be too. Don't worry, Maria. Just remember, you got every syllable has to be stressed or unstressed.
Yeah.
Because you're either going to say it or you're not going to say it as much.
Start with the stresses,
Yeah.
and we'll I'll read it out loud too. After you've given it a go in your head, I'll read it out loud, and as I'm reading, try to mark the stressed syllables. But just give yourself another 30 seconds and. Okay, I'm gonna stop you there. And
I think I'm trying to emphasize every single syllable. I'm like, there's no unstressed syllables. It's Shakespeare. It's just completely. Anyway, go ahead. That's hysterical.
I'm gonna stop you there, and I'm gonna read. Let's just take the first 2 lines to start with, and see if we can kind of try to have a little clicking in our heads here. So 2 households, both alike in dignity. Let's take the words that have multiple syllables in that line. Maybe you already have exactly the idea of where the stresses are supposed to be here, but on a word like 2, that's harder because it's only 1 syllable, so it could be stressed or unstressed, right? Mm-hmm. But what about the word households? When we say the word households, where's the natural stress in that word? Does anyone hear it, households? Or is that, Elizabeth, are you want to tell me?
Like on the last part of the word?
You think it's on the last part, households?
What do you think, Maria?
What do you think, Maria? Let's take a vote.
Yeah, just the word households.
Households. Just saying the word households. Where's the stress?
What do you think,
First.
Jamal? Yeah, I think the
First
first
part.
as well. 2 households.
If we're being democratic,
Yeah.
Elizabeth, I'm afraid
You
that,
lose, man.
you
It's
know,
over. It's all over. Democracy wins. Okay.
Even a republic democracy, like a democratic republic, you still got Mrs. Grafazzi, like she speaks for us all. So anyway.
Thank you very much.
But in the word households, yeah, if you looked it up in the dictionary, it would tell you the emphasis is on households. Okay, so we can make a stress mark on there. Let's see.
Put a stress over
Put a
house.
stress over
at least.
house.
Yeah.
And then, okay, both only has 1 syllable. How about alike? Alike.
John Paul?
Alike?
Yep. The or the like is more stressed in there.
Like.
Alike.
What do you think?
Alike. Everyone here?
Just
Alike.
Like.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Like we say alike. Yeah, it's on the. So we got another stress there.
Right.
Okay. How about dignity? Dignity, I guess.
This is a little
Dignity.
harder of one. I know what I would
Dignity.
say, but what do you think, Maria? You haven't had one yet.
Dignity.
Dignity. Where would you put the stress in the word? You got, remember?
Dig.
Put your hand on your chin. Dignity. And this is like the universal syllable. Like there's just nothing better.
Dignity, yeah.
Every time your chin drops, it's a syllable. Dignity. So I got 3. Where are you going to place the stress?
The first.
I think so too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. On the first for sure. We don't say dignity.
T. Right.
But do we have? What do you think? If dignity, is that stressed, unstressed, unstressed, or is that stressed, unstressed, stressed? Are we? In other words, are we stressing T? Do you think dignity? Even if I say it in the way I would normally say it when I wasn't reading out loud. Dignity. I think we're stressing that. I think
Yeah,
I
the
think
end
if you looked
part.
it up in the dictionary too, it would tell you that the major stress is on the first, but I think there is. I think we're stressing dignity a little bit there on the end. Okay, so we have a stress there. So what does that leave us with? We've got, so we know that house is stressed. There was one, remember we talked about the spondy, that was 2 stresses in a row. Do we think it's 2 households? Like, are we stressing both of those or not? Let's read it out loud. 2 households,
yeah.
both alike in dignity. 2 households, both alike in dignity. No, I don't think we're stressing 2. I think we're unstressing 2, stressing house. We decided we're not stressing holds. I think we're stressing both, right? 2 households, both alike in dignity. That both is an important word there. Both of them are alike, and both alike is actually kind of repetitive, right? If they're alike, they're both alike, right? Both alike. So we put that word there for a reason. I think it's because he wants to stress that they're both alike in dignity. So if we
That's
go,
a really nice example of the sound feeding
Yeah.
the sense in the poem.
he
if
put
the
both
both-
there because otherwise it wouldn't have had a stress, and he wanted to stress on both. And if you know anything about the story of Romeo and Juliet, you know that both, for better or for worse, is
right.
an important concept in a story, right? So 2 households, both alike in dignity. This is iambic, because remember, an iamb was an unstressed followed by a stressed syllable. So we have a pattern, a pretty regular pattern there. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. Okay, I think I got them all. So where would we draw the vertical lines? Where would we put, how many feet are in that line? Go ahead and draw the line there between your iambs and count how many feet are in that line.
Okay, I think I messed up my alike.
You did?
I did. 2
Both
unstressed.
alike.
Both alike. Right. Okay, I think I
So you
messed
should
up.
have unstressed, stress, right? 'Cause we're
Unstressed,
not
stress.
stressing alike.
Right.
We're stressing both alike.
So there's 5.
5 feet, that's exactly right. Yeah,
It's iambic pentameter.
it's iambic pentameter.
Ta-da!
Yay, we got it. This is iambic pentameter, and this 2 households both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to that's actually I thought it was all that's not quite from ancient grudge break to new mutiny. That's a little bit. He's got a little bit of between grudge and break there. There's some ambiguity. I think you can still read it in iambic pentameter, but where civil blood makes civil hands unclean.
Yeah, you can really feel the rhythm.
From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes. Again, there you have like fatal foes. Like the stress is on the important words in this passage, and it's a really nice example of iambic pentameter. A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, right? It's very rhythmic, and Shakespeare, I'm sure you'll talk about when we get there, almost all of Shakespeare's plays have a lot of iambic pentameter in them. Sometimes rhymed, sometimes unrhymed. You'll hear a lot of talk about blank verse poetry from Shakespeare onward. Blank verse means a regular, an unrhymed but regular rhythmic poem. Usually it's iambic pentameter. So when you hear blank verse, it typically means unrhymed iambic pentameter. Shakespeare uses it a lot. He rhymes sometimes, but in this, anyone notice the rhyme scheme here? Dignity, seen, mutiny, unclean. So we put A by dignity. Would we put A next to any other lines?
Look at the last words, guys. Dignity.
Does dignity
seen.
rhyme with seen?
Mutiny.
Right.
Right, exactly. Dignity rhymes with mutiny. So we would put A after the first line and the third line. And then does seen rhyme with anything else here?
Unclean.
Exactly. So this would be A, B, A, B. We would call that rhyme scheme
Right.
A, B, A, B. It continues. C, D, we don't have the rest of it, so look at that. But, so this is pretty straight up iambic pentameter. Which again, Chaucer uses it some, but again, you're not going to be scanning Chaucer too much because the Middle English is. You're probably reading Chaucer and
We're
translation.
reading.
Doing some.
We're gonna do the
examples.
prologue in
Okay.
Middle
Okay.
English
Good.
and memorize that because everyone should know the
Everyone
prologue.
should know
it's
the
just
prologue.
like it's
Yes.
just the way it's done. But the rest of it we'll read. I'm not really sure what our There's a lot of different translations. I haven't actually looked at ours yet. Oh my
Well,
gosh.
hey, how
Whoops.
many times in a class does somebody ask you to think about what you aren't supposed to have read yet, right? Like, that's not fair.
There you go. That's true. Okay, we're probably rounding
Yeah, we're good.
the
But that
scene on
makes
this,
sense,
but-
right, guys? Like the iambic pentameter there, like that's pretty straight up clear there. If you read the next one from Macbeth, that's the famous tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. He mixes up the iambic pentameter more there, you know, in your free time later tonight, go read it. Like, but then at the end it sort of degenerates into no meter, and it's because Macbeth is crazy because he's like destroyed his rationality by
Right.
immorality. So he's like crazy, and so it starts out sort of like in iambic pentameter, but then just falls into nothing because
Right, signifying
because-
nothing. This famous phrase.
he's,
A
you know,
tale
he's
told
got
by an
nothing,
idiot,
right?
full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So you go from this something where the rhyme and the rhythm are kind of building, and then you just degenerate and everything falls away, symbolizing, of course, Macbeth's like movement into madness. So this is another example of the rhyme and the rhythm and the sort of the word choice in the poem. Carrying the meaning, right? So that everything is kind of part of that, the same way that we have with dappled things. So that,
And
thank you very much,
You're
Marisa,
welcome.
for
Yeah, no problem. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow is actually a great example of how an iambic pattern comes naturally to us. Like tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. It sounds like something we would say, right? In fact, my daughter Clara, who's 3, there's this airplane that would always fly over the house at the same time of the afternoon, and she mixes up yesterday and tomorrow. So one day she came into the house and was like, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, that airplane keeps flying over the house. Like just totally naturally, she said that phrase, and I was like, that's proof that Shakespeare's language is really the language of the people. Like,
You're gonna write this book on like stuff I know is true about literature because of my 4-year-old or whatever. Okay, thank you, Dr. Pierson.